Today, we get to jump into part 3 of a series we've called Echoing Hope. And if I haven't had the chance to say hello to you yet, my name is Kurt. I'm a lead pastor around here. And looking forward to getting to know you as we continue to move forward together. There's a couple of quick reminders here that I think pertaining to what we've been talking about that I think will help frame where we're going today. The first week was really sort of a big picture introduction. We looked at Jesus and we looked at his birth, essentially. And we looked at the world into which he was born. He was born into a world that was chaotic. He was born into a world where the powers of evil were fully at work, just like they're at work today, in different forms, but the same kind of mission. And yet Jesus steps in, not from the place of power, but from a place of humility. And as he steps into our world, he models humility and he models what it could look like, what we're invited to mimic or model after, to live the human life as image bearers, to live as though God has actually created us with intent, that God has actually created us with a divine design. And Jesus is the prototype. Jesus is the one who shows us how to do that perfectly. Outside of our own future resurrection, we will not do that perfectly. But the invitation that we have as God's presence in the world and as God's presence is in us is to learn to know Jesus more and more each day. And as we do that, we learn how to lean into his way of living. And that changes the world. That changes so much. And then in week 2, we looked at this idea of free will and what is it all about and why is there suffering? But we didn't just stay at the why questions. We looked at the what, like what is the response? What does it look like to lean into a broken world like Jesus? And we said, well, we look at Jesus. We lament and we look at Jesus. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to move towards some of the more actionable things. We're going to look at what it looks like to actually move into this identity that has been saturated with God's love, where we can courageously learn to step into our own deserts, our own scarcity with courage and hope and satisfaction that we find in God. And then we can learn to apply it. One of the challenges that we have as Christians in the 21st century is that over the centuries, there have been moments where Christianity has had a love problem. We just have. We've had a love problem. And it's sometimes at a very obvious scale. Sometimes it involves actually killing other people. Often when Christians have gone to war in history, it's been against other Christians, oddly enough. You know, and Jesus says that we're supposed to love our enemies, and we're not even sure how to love our own. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. Christianity has a love problem, and we don't even know how to love one another. Pandemics draw that out in weird ways, don't they? Some of you are in the middle of family conflicts right now. Some of you are frustrated with various things that maybe our church had to decide at times. Like it's real. We have differences of opinion. But here's what we need to really notice. Where does opinion have its seat at the table, and where does love have its seat at the table? And the invitation of Jesus is to say, opinion matters, and we can honor those, and we can be different, but love always matters more. Unity always matters more. We may not be uniform, but we can be united. And when we do that, we start to move out of the problem of love and into the possibility of love. But it's hard. It's hard work. You know, I've been here 6 months, and I've heard story after story of people who say, you know, relationships have been hard in church, not just in these 2 years, but in the last 10 years. And it's not unique to our church. It's not unique to any church. It's just simply something we need to name out loud and decide together that it's okay to choose love above all else. And I struggle with this. It's hard to love. It's really hard to love. And we don't even know sometimes what we're trying to do. Like, what is even love? Like, what does love mean? What does it look like in action? So sometimes we know a little bit about love, but we don't necessarily have it all worked out. And that's okay. But according to Jesus in a broken world, we're invited to become better and be better. Right? Like we're invited through Christ to become better people because in Christ we see how to be the best kind of person, and that's him. And then we be better, like we do better, like we learn to act in love better. And I should say on the positive side, 6 months has given me a lot of opportunities to experience love in our church. And I just got to say, there's a lot of love here. A lot of love. So let's just go all in on that. Like, let's go all in on the best part of who we are. Because love changes everything, even sacrificial love. And so, where am I going today? I'm not exactly sure. I do know. I do know where we're going. I want us to really ask the question, when Jesus says to love, what is he talking about? And how does it play out in other places, and other maybe attributes or virtues or fruit of the Christian life? And so we're going to go to the hard one, because I think from the hard one, we can work our way out to some that maybe are a little less hard. And they're all hard. But we'll go to the hardest one, in my opinion. Excuse me. I think I was sitting next to a vent again, and I don't know. I just always, my mouth, by the time I'm up here, it's a little dry. Lots of information for all of you, which you don't need. So, Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 48, put it this way. You have heard that it was said, you must love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who harass you, so that you will be acting as children of your Father who is in heaven. What is Jesus saying here? I mean, he's saying a lot, but one of the things he's trying to highlight is, hey, like when you love enemies, you're acting like God the Father. You're acting like God's children. Not like try to eventually get to a place where you can love enemies. He's saying at the core of your lifestyle, if you want to be people who look like God the Father in the world, if you want to be children and act like children, you love even the unlovable. You love the people you're tempted to hate. You love the people who hate you. I said it was the hardest one. It's the hardest one. Let's keep going. God, he makes the sun rise on both the evil and the good, and sends rain on both the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love only those who love you, what reward do you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? Why the tax collectors? Because in the New Testament, Jesus has these people who talk about the two worst kinds of people: sinners, which is a catch-all category, and this other category, tax collectors, and occasionally Samaritans, right? Like these are the three blocks of bad people in Jesus' day. And so we've like moved from just general sinners to even the tax collectors, for goodness sake, can love their own. Like, come on. And so Jesus wants us to really feel the impact of this teaching by saying those people who steal money from you, not just Rome's taxes, but they take an extra cut and make you poorer than you should ever be. They even know how to do this. Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing? Don't even the Gentiles, those outside nations who at this point, there's no one besides maybe in synagogue settings outside of Jerusalem. There's no one who is seeking Israel's God in this moment. besides Israel for the most part. And so he says, look, like even the outside nations know how to do some of that. And so he says, look, therefore, just as your heavenly Father is complete or perfect in showing love to everyone, so also you must be complete or perfected in that love. So love, what's it really all about? I heard there was a song called Love, What Is It Good For? Absolutely nothing. I don't know. Is that it? Thank you. Thank you. Someone knows it. Predates me, but it's probably a good song. And so, what's it all about? Like when we talk about love, do we talk about Hallmark cards? Do we talk about bunnies and hearts and fluffy things? And sometimes we do, but we all intuitively know that love is so much deeper than a romantic infatuation. Love is so much deeper than our world even wants us to think it is. So what's it all about? At the core of Jesus, we have these things that we talk about a lot around here. Love God, love people, love enemies. But as Christians, we read something like the Sermon on the Mount and we hear these radical ideas of Jesus. And historically, what we've been tempted to do is to take very literally the things that are very convenient for our lifestyles and to take very ethereal, metaphorical approaches to things that aren't. And so we could justify almost anything with that kind of lens for reading the Bible. And in fact, we've seen it over and over and over again. Because Christianity has had a love problem. Sometimes we find ourselves giving our allegiance over inadvertently instead of to the way of Jesus and Jesus is King and love of God. We end up saying, well, what if we package it differently? And this is subtle. This is stuff that we're not doing out of disobedience. It's just we're processing. What does it mean to live as a Christian? And here's a few examples of this that I'll call unruly managers. For some of us, we read something like the Sermon on the Mount and these big, hard teachings of Jesus, and we move into something that is often called sin management mode. And our whole Christian life, for the most part, I focus on, here are the things that if I don't do these things, then I'm in the right with God. Not that I can earn my salvation, we know that, but that functionally speaking, I am a good follower of Jesus if I don't do this and don't do this and don't do this and don't do this, and I'm managing all of the things that could possibly go wrong in my life. Or we go to the opposite extreme, and often 1 and 2 are really kind of fused together because morality management then is like, okay, what do I need to fix? Or what do I need to do, rather? What do I need to do? And so morality management is all about saying, I'm going to make sure that I'm just checking off every single righteous box. And that's going to be the guide for how I live. And if I check the right boxes, then I'll know that I'm moral. And if I'm moral, then I know they are not moral over there. And it just creates a lot of energy, sometimes in missing the point. And it's not to say that Jesus doesn't call us to not sin. And Jesus also calls us to do certain things. But when those things become the frame within which we live with God, we might be missing something. It's a 4-letter word, L-O-V-E. And I'll say this about emerging generations. The younger generations, we have kind of tilted towards, I call myself the younger generation. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. I get reminded often that I don't get to do that anymore. But, what I must fix, right? We talk about what I must fix. And so we read the Sermon on the Mount and we see, love your enemies. I'm going to go into nonviolent revolution mode. Or we see that we're supposed to give money to the poor and not make a big deal about how great we are. We just do it because that's what we do. We're sacrificial. Someone says, I want your outer garment. You give them the whole garment. But again, if all we're doing is externals, we're missing the invitation for something more, something internal. And I think why I say this is this, that our transformational aim matters, and it matters so much. What is actually the aim of the journey we are on and our own transformation? Because here's the truth about life. We are always transforming. We are always becoming someone new. We are always, in fact, I don't know science. A few of you are like scientists, but I know that at the molecular level, like we shed all of our stuff every so often. I think it's every 7 to 10 years, right? Like we're always becoming new, even at the biological level, but at the spiritual level, when our trajectory is headed somewhere, even if it's subtle, we're always becoming. And so where we are aiming matters. It matters so much. And so the goal then is what? If our transformational aim is one of those unruly managers, then we're going to get the fruit of the unruly managers. And it's not all bad fruit. It's just that it's only a little slice of what God wants for our lives. I think what we'll see today is that Jesus is inviting us to notice something about love. Love has an internal component to it. So love has a chosen disposition. So I've chosen to follow Jesus. By the way, that's my hopefully transformational aim. And then Jesus says at the core of who I am is love. And here's some categories for understanding that love. And so I want to become someone who's aiming in that direction with Jesus. And so there's this internal part that I think Jesus is trying to help us understand, that when I say that I want to love my enemies, I have had to in advance done the work to be a loving person. Does that make sense? That I've had to kind of done the hard work. Because the goal essentially is to spend time with Jesus so that we become like Jesus. And yes, I'm going to say this a lot. Love in advance so you can love on the spot. If you become a person who is committed to love, then you might actually, in those moments that are hard to love, become someone who acts in love. A few years ago, this was tested. You know, I had been on a journey trying to kind of just grow in my own awareness of God's love. And, And I had my toddler, 4-year-old and a half-ish. I'm trying to remember how old she was at the time. But we were in Target. Target is this place that's glorious. It's like Walmart's best friend that has all the better stuff. That's kind of pretty much Target, and you don't have that here, and it's the worst. So anyway, Target, there's some women in here who quietly are going, amen. My wife wants to take a 5-hour trip to the nearest Target, so I don't know. Anyway, so we're in Target, and we're shopping, and we're getting certain things, and we'd already told our kiddo, whose name starts with an A and ends with a idia, you can figure out who that is, and we told her, like, we need to just do a few things, and then we're going to get going, okay? So today's not a day you get a toy. Today's not a day you get what you want. But we can look around and you can add things to your Christmas list. That's always the best tool, by the way, with little ones. Oh, we'll add it to the list. I don't know where that list is, but it's there. And so we're doing that. And here we are in aisle 30-something. And she sees something that's pink and glittery and just perfect. And I say, hey, kiddo, remember, like, today's just a list day or whatever. And apparently she's figuring that out. And so she just loses it. In the middle of Seattle, Target, we're in the middle of this big old store, and she starts kicking and screaming and going bonkers. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so I finally say, hey, kiddo, if you can't cool down, like, we're going to have to go. Like, we're just going to leave early and go and not worry about anything else we're doing here. We're just going to get out of here. No, didn't work. She kicks, she screams, she yells. And so I have to scoop her up. Mom's going to pay for the items. And I scoop her up and I say, kiddo, I love you so much. Let's walk. And she's screaming and I look like I'm either kidnapping my child or I'm a terrible dad. I don't know which one they're thinking. No one arrested me, so we'll just go with that. And so I'm out in the parking lot and she gets so furious. And kids are just this way. It's like, I don't blame her for this. It's just emotion and frontal lobe isn't there. You know, it's just that. She starts hitting and smacking me. She smacks me in the face so hard that my glasses fly to the concrete. And I'm, in that moment, boiling inside, right? I've been holding it together. Now my face has been hit multiple times. My glasses might be scratched. And I'm like, ugh. But then in that moment, I realized that I had an invitation to practice the words of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount. Am I going to retaliate or am I going to love? And so I just told her, kiddo, I love you. You can hit me, but I love you. I love you. I love you. It's easier when it's a child that you've decided to love in advance, to not retaliate. But it's a real life example of the moment when our emotion and our sense of self-care and justice rise up within us, right? If you've ever been with children, you know, like when they do something, the best part of you doesn't always come to the surface first. Some of you are laughing because it's like, yeah. I mean, I know that from this weekend. Like, we all kind of just know that, even if we're not parents, like if we're uncles and grandparents or what, like wherever we're at in the life stage we find ourselves in, we just know that even that's hard. And had you not chosen in advance that hitting children's a bad idea, if you had not chosen in advance that actually you love this child, if you had not been formed in your love for this person you've been told is yours, and you taking care of this person, hitting back is the reflex that makes sense. And you could translate this story to all kinds of situations in our world where we're tempted to say, you know what, love looks like you respecting me, so then I will respect you. But Jesus says you respect and love the people who don't return what you deserve, who don't give you dignity. Because Jesus' teaching at the core is love in advance so that you can love on the spot. Love in advance so that you learn how to love on the spot. So you love in advance, you allow God to change you inwardly. So that when you're on the spot, when you're in aisle 36 and your child is smacking you, when you're in a situation at work where someone offends you, when you're in church and for whatever reason there's enemy lines that have been somewhat drawn, even if they're unspoken because we don't like to speak about these things, we can step in and say, wait a second, no. I want to be formed into a loving person that looks like Jesus dying on the cross for the very people who hung him there. What would that be like? Because inward formation with God helps us to respond. Inward formation with God helps us respond to pain and injustice just like Jesus. A decision made in advance, meditated on, prayed through, experienced in a real way with Jesus, empowers you and I to step into hard stuff like Jesus. And that's not the easiest thing, but we have this model. I mean, 1 Peter chapter 2 tells us like Jesus had done the work, like Jesus knew who he was. He knew who God the Father had said he was. And so in the hardest hour of his life, when he wants to say, God, like, take the cup away from me, and we'll look at that in a few weeks, this incident where Jesus is like, take away this hard thing I have to do, but not my will. And he steps in courageously all the way to the cross. Well, Peter, later in his life, reflects on this, and this is what Peter says. If you suffer for doing good, and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Jesus didn't just say, love people who won't love you back. Jesus showed us, and Peter wants to make sure that we understand how real and applicable this is. It wasn't a one-off that Jesus did this because he had to save the world. It was, in fact, a one-off that Jesus saves the world. But in discipleship, Peter makes it clear that love has active, regular consequence. But it's not just love. And here's the big idea today. It's not just love. It's the whole package. It's the whole, what Paul will call the fruit of the Spirit. As a reminder, Galatians 5 puts the fruit of the Spirit like this. But the fruit of the Spirit is love. Again, why is it named first? Because it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against things like this. So we can love in advance. Can we choose joy and contentment in advance? Can we become peaceful people in advance? Can we become patient in advance so that when we're hurried, we can decide that we could slow down? Can we become people of kindness, goodness, faithfulness in advance? Can we be self-controlled? Can we love on the spot so we can love in advance? Can we have faithfulness in advance? Am I saying this right? So that we can love? Yeah, you get it. Anyway, it's important. It matters so much. I got to see this modeled to me firsthand. There's a family that live in the West Bank. Their family is called the Nasser family. The Nasser family at Tent of Nations, I was there in 2014 on a kind of a dual immersion trip where we spent time at holy sites and got to learn about the historical background of Jesus-y things, but we also spent time with people on the ground who were saying that we can build peace here. Many of these folks were Christians, and at the Tent of Nations, they're in fact that. And we got to spend time with Dawood Nasser. And so what I want to do, rather than trying to explain what's going on there, years ago, Relevant Magazine put together a short little video about them. And so I'm going to show you a little tiny snippet of that, and then we'll wrap things up. So check out them through the lens of loving and making the choice to love and how it helps them love on the spot. Let's check this out.
When we plant an olive tree, we believe in the future because the first olives might come after 10 years. And when you plant a tree, you believe that this tree is going to bear fruits, not maybe tomorrow, but 10, 15 years. And this is the hope that we have to live in. On the ground, we had a lot of attacks on the Israeli settlers who came here threatening us with guns. And the last time they came in 2002 with big machines. They started cutting the ground in order to build a road. But we managed to stop them legally after 3 days. And the settlers were very angry. And they cut 250 olive trees from our property. So with physical pressure, we are still here. Now they are trying to isolate us. The road is blocked since 2001. We got demolishing orders here 2 years ago. We cannot build, we cannot have access to running water, no electricity. And of course, there's no development. And of course, this situation will force the people whether to react violently or to resign or leave the country. There are people who believe in violence, but what can we achieve with violence except violence? we said we are people who believe in justice, and one day the Son of Justice will rise again, sooner or later. We refuse to be victims, and we refuse to hate, because we believe that people are created in the image of God, and they are not created to hate each other. So we created a fourth way of action, which is the Jesus way, to overcome evil with good, hatred with love, and darkness with light, under the slogan, we refuse to be enemies. It's easy to say that, but it's very difficult to live it. But this is the Christian witness in this area of the world. We have to be witnesses, starting here, and tell people how it's possible to love your neighbor like yourself. And when we act in a different way, we force the other to see us as human beings. It's important for us, including Israeli people, to come. We want them to come and see and realize that there are human beings who are living on the other side. And those people, we need to listen to their stories. And we are trying to go on with our vision in small steps. It's like a farmer who are using the horse to plow. He's not allowed to look backwards, because the moment he looks behind, the line won't be straight. So he has to focus on his vision, but go slowly. This is what we are learning to do here. But the suffering is not the end of the story, but it can be seen as a path to achieve the goals and to achieve the vision. Always, we need to keep faith, we need to keep hope, and we need to keep love. And those three words together are the foundation of our work here. So without faith, without hope, and without love, nothing can be done here.
I just absolutely love the slogan, "We refuse to be enemies." And I can tell you on the ground, this is a video from 2014. Since then, they've had more altercations. They've had more actual physical violence done to them in the last couple of months. They've endured violence. Dawood was one who was put in the hospital in February, recovering as we speak. But he chose, and his family on this farm, which is just an incredible light. It's just incredible in every way you can imagine as a witness to the gospel of Jesus. They said, we are not going to be people who hate our enemy. We're going to be people who love our enemies. And so in that setting where there's conflict and struggle and difference, they said, no. We're going to love in advance, and we're going to therefore learn to love on the spot. And I think to kind of wrap this up, the big idea is just simply who we become determines how we will respond to pain and injustice in our lives. As Christians, we have a resource that no other person on the planet who's not a Christian has. And if you're in here or watching and you're not a follower of Jesus, just know that there is something amazing about following Jesus. And it's that God's presence literally becomes something that is active in your life, and a whole new creative set of resources start flowing through you and through the family of followers of Jesus that you're a part of. And so where it may seem irrational to love people that don't love us back, Jesus says, it's possible, I've done it, and you can learn from me how to do it. Because the world sees us and they say, you know what, how are you going to actually make a difference in this world, church? And we can look and we can say, well, we don't have all the answers. In fact, sometimes our answers are a bit divided. But one thing we have in common is that we have chosen to love in advance. So whenever we're stepping into pain with someone, we can hold it differently. Whenever we're stepping into conflict, we can step into conflict differently. Whenever we're hurting in our own lives and we have stuff going on, which is pretty often, I'm sure, The love that we have in advance can inform how we engage that pain right there, right then on the spot. Imagine if Christians throughout the world took this as their primary marching order. Imagine if Christians throughout this city said, we're going to love in advance so that we can love on the spot, and we're going to love on the spot actively because that's who Jesus is. I think our city would be different. I think our world would be different. May we be those people. May we choose love because Jesus shows us love. And may we become people devoted to King Jesus, who launched an upside-down movement of ragtag folks who should have been left out, brought them in, and said, you have what it takes to love. Let me show you. And our world literally was never the same. Amen. Amen.